New Jersey's property tax increases have been outpacing inflation, increasing on average by 4.7% in 2025. Inflation that year was 2.7%. The average homeowner in New Jersey is paying a whopping $10,570 a year in property taxes. So what's driving those costs, and more importantly, the increases?
You worked for 40 years, saved diligently, and finally reached the golden finish line. You paid off your mortgage and assumed your financial struggles were over. But if you chose to spend your retirement in one of 3 specific American states, you are unknowingly bleeding wealth. A hidden network of stealth taxes, reassessment loopholes, and demographic penalties is quietly draining an average of $5,000 from retiree accounts every single year. Today, I am exposing the 3 states engineered to confiscate your retirement savings and the legal defense strategies that protect you. Let us get into it. State number 3, Illinois and the property tax paradox. You might think you did your research. You looked up the income tax rates, you checked the local weather, and you found a beautiful community. But state legislatures are incredibly skilled at financial sleight of hand. They offer a massive tax break at the front door while quietly installing a financial vacuum at the back door. This brings us to the first trap. This state advertises itself as a retiree haven because it completely exempts your pension and 401k from state income taxes. It sounds like a dream, but for thousands of retirees, it is a mathematical nightmare. If you look at a surface-level retirement brochure, Illinois looks like a fantastic deal. The state government proudly boasts that it does not tax distributions from pensions, 401k plans, or individual retirement accounts. For a retiree living on a fixed income of $60,000 a year from a pension, this sounds like a massive annual savings. You think you are beating the system, but the state still has to pave the roads, fund the schools, and pay for municipal pensions. If they do not take the money from your income, they must take it from somewhere else. In Illinois, they extract it directly from the ground underneath your feet. Illinois possesses the second highest property tax rate in the entire nation, sitting at a staggering average of 2.27% of a home's value.
Illinois has the second highest property tax rate in the USA. Most buyers find out after closing. Property tax is collected by your county, not your mortgage lender, but it is added to your monthly payment through escrow. The average effective rate in Illinois is 2.08%. On a $300,000 home, that is $6,240 per year.
To understand how devastating this mechanism is, we must look at the math through the eyes of a retiree. Meet Richard and Martha, a couple in their late 60s who retired in Naperville, a popular suburb of Chicago in DuPage County. They bought their 4-bedroom home 30 years ago for $200,000. They worked tirelessly to pay off the mortgage so they could live debt-free in retirement. Over the decades, the value of their home naturally appreciated to $600,000. Because they hold no mortgage, they assumed their housing costs would remain minimal. But the local tax assessor's office continually reassesses the property value. At the Illinois average tax rate, Richard and Martha receive a property tax bill of over $13,600 every single year. That means even with a completely paid-off house, they are forced to pay over $1,100 a month just for the right to continue living in the home they already own. This is the property tax paradox. The state gave them a $3,000 break on their income tax, but clawed back $13,000 through local property assessments. It results in a net loss of $10,000 a year. When inflation drives up the cost of groceries, utilities, and healthcare, that rigid property tax bill does not care. It must be paid, or the county will literally foreclose on the home and sell it at a tax auction. Richard and Martha were forced to pull money out of their emergency savings just to pay the county tax collector. They are bleeding equity. They thought their paid-off home was a secure asset, but the state turned it into a massive, unavoidable liability. The reassessment appeal trap. Compounding, the issue is the cottage industry of property tax appeals. Illinois makes the assessment process so convoluted that retirees often have to hire specialized law firms to appeal their property taxes. These law firms charge no upfront fee, but they take up to 50% of whatever tax savings they secure for you. Even when you win a reduction against the county, you lose half the benefit to the attorneys fighting the battle. The system is designed to extract wealth at every touch point. While Illinois drains your bank account through the soil, the next state on our list uses a complex, invisible legislative cliff to penalize you simply for turning 73 years old. State number 2, Connecticut and the demographic penalty. Connecticut is a beautiful state with picturesque coastal towns, excellent infrastructure, and incredible healthcare facilities. But underneath the charm operates a tax code that feels mathematically engineered to punish people for saving too much money. Unlike Illinois, Connecticut does tax retirement income, but they do it using a highly deceptive tiered system. The state tells retirees that if their adjusted gross income remains below $75,000 for an individual or $100,000 for a married couple, their pension and annuity income is fully exempt from state taxes. This sounds completely reasonable. A couple living on $80,000 a year feels secure knowing they remain under the threshold. They budget their entire lives around this specific tax exemption, but the trap snaps shut the year you turn 73. Under federal law, when you reach age 73, the Internal Revenue Service forces you to start taking required minimum distributions, or RMDs, from your traditional pre-tax retirement accounts. You have no choice. If you fail to withdraw the exact mathematical amount the government dictates, you face a severe financial penalty. Let us look at David, a 73-year-old retired engineer living in Stamford, Connecticut. David and his wife live on a comfortable pension and Social Security, totaling roughly $90,000 a year. They sit below the state's $100,000 threshold, so their pension is protected. But David also did the responsible thing during his career. He saved heavily in a traditional 401k, amassing an $800,000 nest egg. When he turned 73, the federal government forced him to take his first required minimum distribution of roughly $29,000. He did not need the money to live on, but he had to withdraw it. That forced withdrawal pushed his total adjusted gross income for the year to $119,000. Instantly, David and his wife crossed the $100,000 exemption cliff. The state of Connecticut looked at their new income and entirely revoked their pension tax exemption. Not only did David have to pay taxes on the mandatory 401k withdrawal, but his previously tax-free pension was dragged back into the taxable column. This is the legislative cliff. By forcing his income up by $29,000, the combined federal and state tax liability cascaded. David lost over $6,000 in unexpected state tax liability in a single year, simply because he celebrated a birthday.
Here's what a $50,000 versus $1 million salary looks like after taxes in Connecticut.
The Connecticut trap becomes significantly worse when a spouse passes away. If David dies, his wife loses his Social Security check, meaning her total income drops. However, she now files her taxes as a single individual. The state threshold for single filers is only $75,000. Her income dropped, but because the threshold dropped faster, she remains pushed over the cliff. She pays higher taxes on less income during the most vulnerable period of her life. The state relies on the fact that most people do not project their tax brackets 10 years into the future. They lure you in with a generous exemption, knowing full well that federal required distributions will eventually force you over the threshold, allowing them to tax everything you own. Connecticut uses federal laws to trigger state taxes, but the final state on our list has engineered a system where they tax you for leaving and they tax your children when you die. State number 1, New Jersey and the exit toll. New Jersey is infamous for possessing the highest property taxes in the country, averaging nearly 2.5%. But the real devastation for retirees in New Jersey happens when they finally decide they have had enough and try to leave, or when they attempt to pass their legacy on to their families.
The first 5 states that will collapse. Move out now. Number 3, New Jersey. New Jersey's economic and infrastructural woes make it another state at risk of collapse. The state has some of the highest taxes in the nation, driven by enormous pension liabilities and budget deficits. Property taxes, in particular, place a heavy burden on residents. As you can imagine, residents are not too happy about this. New Jersey's infrastructure is also aging.
Let us start with what happens when you attempt to escape. Many retirees realize the cost of living in New Jersey is unsustainable, so they decide to sell their home and move to Florida, Nevada, or Texas. They list their house, find a buyer, and sit down at the closing table, expecting to receive their massive equity check to fund their new life. That is when the title company attorney hands them the settlement sheet and they see a massive deduction they never anticipated. It is formally known as the estimated tax payment on the sale of real property, but residents refer to it as the New Jersey exit tax. If you sell your home and move out of state, New Jersey law requires the buyer's attorney to withhold either 8.97% of your total capital gain or 2% of the total sale price of the home, whichever is higher, right at the closing table. This money is sent directly to the State Division of Taxation before you ever see a dime. Technically, this operates as an estimated tax payment to ensure you pay your final income taxes before you cross state lines. You might get a portion of it back when you file your final state tax return the following spring. But for a retiree selling a $600,000 home, having $12,000 seized at the closing table completely disrupts their ability to purchase a new home, pay for moving expenses, or furnish a new condo. The state holds your money hostage for months, earning interest on your equity while you struggle to fund your relocation. But the exit tax represents only half of the nightmare. The true horror of New Jersey's tax code reveals itself when a retiree passes away, the class-based inheritance confiscation. Most people know about the federal estate tax, which currently only hits the ultra-wealthy. But New Jersey is one of only a handful of states that imposes an inheritance tax. An estate tax taxes the total value of the money left behind. An inheritance tax targets the specific person who receives the money. In New Jersey, if you leave your money to your spouse, your children, or your grandchildren, Class A beneficiaries, they are generally exempt. But what if you are a widow without children? What if you want to leave your hard-earned savings to your beloved niece, your nephew, your lifelong best friend, or a sibling who helped care for you in your final years? If you leave money to a sibling, Class C, New Jersey exempts the first $25,000, but then takes up to 16% of the rest. If you leave money to a niece, a nephew, or a friend, Class D, there is absolutely zero exemption. The state taxes the entire amount at 15 to 16% from the very first dollar. Meet Sarah, a 78-year-old widow living in Bergen County. She had no children, but she maintained an incredibly close relationship with her nephew, Michael. She carefully saved $300,000, intending to leave it to Michael to help him pay off his student loans and buy a home for his new family. When Sarah passed away, Michael inherited the account. But because of his relationship to her, the state of New Jersey classified him as a Class D beneficiary. They handed him an inheritance tax bill for $45,000. Sarah spent 30 years clipping coupons, driving used cars, and living below her means to leave a legacy. The state confiscated $45,000 of her life's work simply because she did not have biological children. The tax code effectively penalized her family structure.
Did you know? Estate tax, also known as an inheritance tax, is imposed on the transfer of property or assets after a person's death.
These three states rely on a web of complex statutes to slowly siphon money from your accounts. But the danger does not stop at the state line. If you attempt to flee these high-tax states to protect your wealth, you will trigger one of the most aggressive, technologically advanced investigations in the country. The domicile audit. You cannot just run away. When retirees realize they lose $5,000 a year to stealth taxes in states like Illinois, Connecticut, New York, or New Jersey, their first instinct is to pack their bags and move to a tax-free haven like Florida. They buy a condo in Miami, change their driver's license, register to vote in the new state, and stop paying their old state income taxes. They think the problem is solved. 18 months later, they receive a certified letter in the mail from their former state's Department of Revenue. It is a notice of a domicile audit. High-tax states bleed wealthy residents, and they refuse to let them go without a fight. States like New York and New Jersey employ entire divisions of highly aggressive, specialized auditors whose sole job is to prove that you never actually left or that you did not sever ties properly. The statutory rule seems simple. To avoid state income taxes, you must spend at least 183 days of the year outside of the high-tax state. You must also prove that your new state is your true domicile, your permanent primary home. But these auditors do not just take your word for it. They approach the audit like a criminal investigation. If you claim you moved to Florida, but you kept your old house in New Jersey to visit during the summer, the auditors launch a forensic examination of your life. They demand your cell phone records. They triangulate the cell towers to track exactly where your phone was physically located every single day of the year. If your phone pinged a tower in Newark on a Tuesday, that counts as a full day in New Jersey. They pull your electronic EZ-Pass toll records to see which state highways you drove on. They audit your credit card statements to see if you purchased groceries at a Publix in Florida or a local market in New Jersey. The teddy bear test. They dive into the emotional aspects of your life. Auditors use what is internally called the teddy bear test. They demand copies of your moving manifests and insurance riders. Where is your expensive art collection? Where is your family heirloom jewelry? Where is the family dog? If your primary veterinarian remains located in your old state, the auditor argues that nobody leaves their beloved pet behind when establishing a permanent home. Therefore, your true domicile remains in the high-tax state. If you lose a domicile audit, the financial penalty is apocalyptic. The state retroactively taxes all your income, your pension, and your capital gains for the entire time you claim to be a non-resident. They add massive interest penalties and late fees. A simple mistake in tracking your travel days can cost you tens of thousands of dollars in a single ruling. You cannot just change your mailing address. You must legally, physically, and emotionally sever your life from the state trying to tax you. The state auditors are relentless, but there is one final trap that triggers when state taxes interact with the federal government. It is a hidden surcharge that makes your health care drastically more expensive. The federal ripple effect, the IRMAA trap. When high property taxes and required minimum distributions force you to pull more money out of your retirement accounts just to survive, you do not just increase your state tax liability. You actively trigger a federal trap known as IRMAA. IRMA stands for the Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It is a hidden, mandatory surcharge added directly to your monthly Medicare Part B and Part D premiums. The federal government looks at your modified adjusted gross income from 2 years prior. If you lived in a high-tax state like Illinois and you had to withdraw an extra $20,000 from your IRA just to pay your massive property tax bill, that withdrawal fundamentally increases your federal income. If that specific withdrawal pushes your income even one single dollar over the federal IRMAA threshold, your Medicare premiums instantly skyrocket. For example, if the standard Medicare Part B premium sits at $174.70 a month, triggering the first tier of IRMA pushes that premium to over $244 a month. If you are married, the surcharge applies to both you and your spouse. That is an extra $1,600 a year ripped directly out of your Social Security check, all because you withdrew extra money to pay a local county property tax bill. This represents the ultimate cascading failure of retiring in the wrong state. The local property tax forces the IRA withdrawal. The IRA withdrawal pushes you over the state exemption cliff. The state taxes the pension. The combined income triggers the federal Medicare surcharge. Your money faces a tax from the county level, the state level, and the federal level simultaneously. Most people never see the big picture until their checking account runs dry. To survive this incredibly hostile financial landscape, you cannot rely on generic advice or simple rules of thumb. You must adopt a highly defensive posture. You need a specific, tactical strategy to shield your money from the states desperate to confiscate it. How to protect your retirement. The defense strategy. This sounds like a hopeless battle against an unbeatable system, but it is not. You possess the legal right to organize your finances to pay the absolute minimum amount of tax required by law. You simply must stop making the unforced errors these states count on. Here is the exact playbook to protect your wealth. Phase 1. The Pre-Move Calculations Rule. 1. Conduct a phantom budget test before you move. Never look at a state's income tax rate in isolation. Before you decide to retire anywhere, calculate the phantom costs. Call a local real estate agent and ask for the historical property tax increases for the specific county over the last 10 years. Look up the local sales tax, the vehicle registration fees, and the specific municipal taxes. A state with zero income tax, but a 3% property tax, will invariably drain your wealth faster than a state with a moderate income tax and low property values. Run the math on a 10-year projection, assuming property taxes increase by 4% annually. Rule 2. Prepare for the exit tax liquidity trap. If you own a home in a state with an exit tax like New Jersey, plan for the severe cash flow disruption when you sell. Do not assume you will have the full equity available on closing day to buy your next home. Secure a bridge loan, or ensure you have sufficient liquid cash in a high-yield savings account to cover your moving expenses, your down payment, and your initial living costs while the State Division of Taxation holds your money hostage. Phase 2. Income and Asset Shielding Rule 3. Defuse the required minimum distribution cliff early. If you live in a state like Connecticut with a rigid income exemption threshold, you must act long before you turn 73. Work with a certified public accountant to execute strategic Roth IRA conversions during your early retirement years, typically between ages 60 and 70 when your income dips. By intentionally paying taxes on smaller amounts now, you reduce the overall size of your traditional IRA. This definitively shrinks your future mandatory withdrawals, keeping your future income safely below the state's penalty cliff. Rule 4. Optimize your asset location. Not all money faces the same taxation rules. If you live in a state that aggressively taxes interest and dividends, locate those specific high-yield income-generating investments strictly inside your tax-sheltered accounts, like your IRA. Keep your highly tax-efficient investments, like municipal bonds or index funds, in your standard taxable brokerage accounts. This strategy, known as asset location, forms an invisible shield preventing the state from skimming off your annual investment growth. Phase 3. Legal structuring and execution. Rule 5. Restructure your legacy to defeat the inheritance tax. If you live in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or Maryland, and you plan to leave money to someone other than a direct spouse or child, you cannot leave it sitting in a simple checking account. Consult an estate planning attorney immediately. Utilize specific irrevocable trust structures or carefully timed lifetime gifting strategies to transfer your wealth legally before you pass away. Moving the money while you are alive under the federal gift tax exemption entirely bypasses the state's predatory inheritance classification system. Rule 6. The absolute severance protocol for relocation. If you decide to flee a high-tax state, execute a flawless exit. Do not leave a single string attached. Sell your primary residence. Change your driver's license, your voter registration, and your vehicle titles on day 1. Close your local bank accounts and open new ones physically located in your destination state. Find a new doctor, a new dentist, and a new veterinarian in your new hometown. Keep a detailed physical logbook of your travel, saving airline boarding passes and toll receipts to definitively prove you spent more than 183 days outside the hostile state. Do not give the domicile auditors a single shred of circumstantial evidence to use against you. The retirement landscape looks entirely different than it did 30 years ago. You are no longer just saving for the future. You are actively defending your wealth against governments that view your nest egg as a permanent solution to their own fiscal mismanagement. They write the tax codes in dense, confusing legislative language specifically so you will not notice the money disappearing until it is far too late. They rely on your complacency. They rely on your assumption that a paid-off house guarantees a cheap retirement. You must discard those outdated assumptions. Treat your retirement strategy like a corporate business and realize that every dollar you legally shield from the state is a dollar of pure profit for your family's future. If you currently live in one of these high-tax states and experience the shock of a massive property tax reassessment, or if you successfully executed an escape to a better state, drop your story in the comments below. Sharing your real-world experience is the absolute best way to warn others who are blindly walking into these financial traps. If this breakdown helped you understand the severe vulnerabilities hidden in your retirement plan, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The state legislatures rewrite these tax codes every single year to find new, creative ways into your wallet. I will continue to track these threats and expose the loopholes so you can stay one step ahead. Stay vigilant, audit your tax exposure, and never assume the state has your best interests at heart.